Episode 28, The Spirit Set Free, Romanticism in Art, Music, and Literature, an AP European History podcast by Hammer History Productions. Welcome back to the Once and Future Present. I'm your host, Casey Brooks, and today we're diving into the wild, emotional, and imaginative world of Romanticism. We'll explore how artists, writers, and musicians in the early 1800s challenged Enlightenment reason with feelings, nature, and rebellion. To help us unravel this dramatic era, I'm joined as always by Dr. Morgan. Hi, Dr. Morgan.
Hi, Casey. Romanticism is one of those movements where politics, culture, and emotion all collide. We'll see how this artistic response was deeply shaped by the political upheavals of the French Revolution and the rise of nationalism across Europe.
And we have Professor Thea with us too. Hello, Professor.
Hello, Casey. Romanticism fascinates me because it's all about the power of imagination, the beauty and terror of nature, and the belief that emotions matter just as much as logic. It was a cultural rebellion against the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment.
And we're thrilled to welcome back Dr. Romano, our favorite art history expert. Glad to have you.
Always a pleasure, Casey. Romantic art is emotionally intense, visually dramatic, and packed with symbolism. I'm excited to explore how artists painted revolution, despair, and dreams.
Let's get started. So what exactly is Romanticism?
Romanticism was a broad cultural movement that emerged in the late 1700s and flourished in the early 1800s. It emphasized emotion over reason, individualism over conformity, and nature over industrialization. Romantics were drawn to the irrational, the mysterious, and the sublime.
Wait, what does sublime mean in this context?
Great question. In Romantic thought, the sublime referred to experiences that were overwhelming, so vast, beautiful, or terrifying that they inspired awe and even fear. Think of standing at the edge of a stormy cliff or hearing thunder echo across mountains. It's nature at its most powerful and uncontrollable.
Romanticism was also deeply connected to the rise of political movements like nationalism. Across Europe, people were beginning to define themselves not just by their rulers or religion, but by shared language, culture, and folk traditions. Romantic thinkers and artists celebrated these national identities. They collected folk tales, wrote national anthems, and painted heroic scenes from national history. In countries like Germany, Poland, and Italy, Romanticism helped spark cultural pride that laid the groundwork for later independence and unification movements.
Exactly. They wanted truth not through science, but through feeling. Romantic poets, painters, and composers believed that the deepest truths came from the heart and the imagination.
So, this was kind of a pushback against the Enlightenment?
Yes, a reaction against Enlightenment ideals of order, reason, and progress. But it wasn't just rejection. Romantics asked, what if reason alone isn't enough? What if humans are more than logic machines?
And what if political change doesn't bring happiness? After decades of revolutions, many people felt let down. Romanticism became a way to explore dreams, passions, and even despair.
It's also worth noting that Romanticism followed Neoclassicism. Neoclassical art emphasized harmony, rationality, and ancient ideals. Romanticism flipped that, favoring emotion, intuition, and even chaos. Where Neoclassicism admired marble statues, Romantics painted storm clouds and crumbling ruins.
Did philosophers influence this change too?
Absolutely. Rousseau argued that modern society corrupted our natural emotions. Immanuel Kant suggested that the mind actively shapes our experience of the world, that beauty and meaning are personal. These ideas helped fuel Romantic belief in the power of feeling.
Did Romantics see nature as spiritual or religious?
Yes, very much so. Romantics often saw nature as more than just scenery. It was a source of spiritual insight and emotional truth. Many believed that nature had a divine quality, something sacred that could connect people to deeper meaning. This spiritual view of nature was part of a larger concern about how the Industrial Revolution was changing that relationship. As cities grew and factories spread, Romantics worried that people were becoming disconnected from the natural world. You might even think of it as an early form of environmentalism. They feared that nature was being treated like a machine, something to conquer and exploit, instead of a living force deserving of reverence.
That's pretty intense. Let's talk about art. What does romantic art actually look like?
Dramatic, emotional, and often dark. Romantic painters used composition and color intentionally to draw the viewer's eye and evoke specific feelings. One of the best examples is The Raft of the Medusa by Theodore Géricault. It shows shipwreck survivors in agony, reaching toward a rescue ship on the horizon. The canvas is huge, and the bodies are twisted with suffering and hope.
That sounds heartbreaking.
It is, but it was also political. The painting criticized the French government's incompetence. The shipwreck was caused by a corrupt captain who got his post through favoritism. Romantic art often showed the failures of power.
And what matters isn't just the subject, but the composition. Géricault used a pyramidal structure to lead the viewer's eye upward toward the hope of rescue, even as the lower figures are consumed by death. That deliberate arrangement enhances the emotional impact.
Oh, so how an image is arranged really changes how we feel about it.
Exactly. Artists use what we call the principles of composition, things like balance, movement, emphasis, and contrast, to guide your eye and make you feel something. They also rely on the elements of design like color, shape, and texture. For example, red often symbolizes passion or violence, while gray might suggest despair or detachment.
Romanticism is full of symbolism. In fact, every part of a painting can have deeper meaning. A broken chain might symbolize freedom. A storm might stand for emotional turmoil. Romantics loved using visual metaphors.
So it's kind of like a code you have to learn to read?
That's a great way to put it. Learning to look at art is like learning a language. Once you understand the symbols, the composition, and the use of color, the image opens up with meaning.
Another powerful work is Eugène Delacroix's Liberty, Leading the People. It's a great example of how Romantic artists celebrated national identity and revolutionary ideals. A woman representing liberty leads a crowd over barricades during the July Revolution of 1830. Smoke fills the air, flags wave, and people of all classes join the fight. But it's more than just a snapshot of a moment in history. It's packed with symbolism. Liberty herself is shown barefoot and bare-breasted, blending realism with classical imagery. Her raised musket and the French tricolor flag symbolize active resistance and national pride. The people around her include students, workers, and even a child, reminding us that revolution is a collective act.
It's both a political message and a mythic vision. Delacroix painted revolution as glorious and messy, not cold strategy, but fiery emotion. The emotional energy of the painting, and the way liberty strides forward without hesitation, captures the romantic faith in the righteous fury of the people.
And what about landscapes? I think I saw a romantic painting of a guy on a mountain.
That would be Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog by Caspar David Friedrich. A lone figure stands on a cliff, staring out over a misty landscape. It's a portrait of solitude, reflection, and the sublime. Friedrich's work often suggested that nature holds spiritual meaning, but it also reflected anxiety about the future. The figure is both awed and isolated, standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. You can read it as a kind of meditation on how industrial society might be pulling us away from that profound connection with the natural world. Some scholars see it as a symbolic expression of nationalist identity, too. This solitary figure represents a thoughtful citizen contemplating the fate of a homeland veiled in uncertainty. It's a painting about both personal and collective identity.
The human figure is small against the vastness of nature, a reminder of our limits and our longing.
Were there other romantic painters we should know?
Absolutely. Francisco Goya's The 3rd of May, 1808 shows Spanish civilians being executed by French soldiers during Napoleon's occupation of Spain. It's not just a gruesome scene, it's a powerful political statement. Goya was responding to a real event. When Spanish citizens rose up against the French army, Napoleon ordered brutal crackdowns. Goya's painting captures the horror of state violence and the courage of ordinary people. The man in the center, arms outstretched like a martyr, evokes both Christ and the cost of resistance. The faceless, uniformed soldiers appear mechanical and inhuman. The use of stark light and dark contrast, what we call chiaroscuro, intensifies the emotional weight. It's a direct appeal to the viewer's conscience.
Goya was ahead of his time in showing trauma and injustice without glorifying it. His work paved the way for later art that critiques power and violence, very much in line with Romanticism's moral urgency.
And what about The Nightmare? That one's burned into my brain.
Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare is haunting, literally. It shows a woman in deep sleep with a demonic figure crouched on her chest and a ghostly horse looming behind her. It's unsettling on purpose. The painting taps into themes of anxiety, unconscious fear, and vulnerability. The incubus represents dark thoughts that creep in during sleep, while the unnatural composition and distorted lighting create a dreamlike unease. Fuseli helped open up the visual world of the psyche.
Romantic art seems so emotional. Why were they drawn to sadness or fear?
Because those feelings are powerful. Romantics believed that art should stir the soul. Pain, longing, and beauty were all part of what made life meaningful. And sometimes, darkness reveals truth in ways that light cannot.
Now, let's switch gears. What about romantic literature?
Romantic writers were some of the boldest voices of their age. Take Goethe's Faust from Germany. It's about a scholar who sells his soul to the devil for unlimited knowledge and pleasure. It captures the romantic conflict between reason and passion.
That sounds kind of spooky. Is that where the idea of making a deal with the devil comes from?
It helped popularize the idea, yes. And speaking of spooky, we can't forget Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. She was only 18 when she wrote it. It's about a scientist who creates life, but it becomes a monster.
Frankenstein isn't just science fiction, it's romanticism in action. It explores the dangers of unchecked ambition, the pain of isolation, and the tragedy of trying to play God. Victor Frankenstein represents Enlightenment hubris. He believes science can master life itself. But once his creature is born, he's horrified by what he's done and abandons it. The creature, intelligent and sensitive, longs for love but faces only fear and rejection. It's a story about the consequences of emotional neglect and the deep human need for connection. The novel also asks who the real monster is: Victor for creating and abandoning life, or the creature for turning to violence when denied compassion. It's a deeply emotional, moral, and psychological tale that captures the romantic fear that society crushes the individual, even as it demands conformity.
And Frankenstein is part of a larger tradition known as Gothic literature, a darker sibling to Romanticism. Gothic novels often explore haunted castles, psychological torment, and the supernatural. Think of Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, or the eerie, suspenseful stories of Anne Radcliffe. These writers used setting and mood to externalize inner fear and emotional intensity. The Gothic showed that terror, like beauty, could be sublime.
And Lord Byron?
Byron was the ultimate romantic celebrity, handsome, rebellious, and scandalous. His poetry often featured the Byronic hero, a brooding, passionate figure haunted by his past.
What exactly is a Byronic hero?
Someone who is proud, isolated, and driven by inner demons. Think Batman or Severus Snape, troubled but compelling. Byron's characters were deeply emotional and often doomed. He even went to fight in the Greek War of Independence and died there, making him a romantic martyr.
Romantic writers supported national freedom movements and opposed tyranny. Byron's actions and poetry helped connect the ancient ideals of Greece with modern struggles for liberty.
William Wordsworth focused on nature and memory. In poems like Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, he reflects on how childhood experiences in nature shaped his soul.
So childhood was important to them?
Very. They saw children as pure, emotional, and uncorrupted by society, almost like spiritual guides.
And Victor Hugo's Les Miserables showed how society fails the poor and vulnerable. It's a sweeping novel of justice, grace, and resistance. The hero, Jean Valjean, is a former convict trying to live an honest life, but he's relentlessly pursued by a legal system that refuses to forgive. Through his story, Hugo critiques a society obsessed with punishment instead of compassion. The novel also explores poverty, revolution, and the struggle for redemption, core romantic concerns.
And Hugo doesn't just tell a personal story, he ties it to political revolution. The barricade scenes, based on real uprisings in Paris, reflect the romantic belief that history is driven by passion and idealism. Hugo wanted readers to feel both outrage at injustice and hope for human dignity.
So it's both epic and emotional?
Exactly. Les Miserables is the romantic imagination at full scale, turning one man's life into a mirror of an entire society's moral struggle.
Okay, now let's talk music. How does Romanticism show up there?
Romantic composers broke away from strict forms and started writing music that told stories or expressed deep emotions. Beethoven is the perfect example. In fact, his Third Symphony, called the Eroica, was originally dedicated to Napoleon. Beethoven admired Napoleon as a symbol of liberty and revolution. But when Napoleon crowned himself emperor, Beethoven felt betrayed and angrily scratched out the dedication. That shift tells us a lot about the political climate of the early 1800s. Even great artists wrestled with hope, disappointment, and shifting ideals in an age of upheaval.
His early work was classical, but as he lost his hearing, his music became more emotional and revolutionary. His Ninth Symphony includes voices singing about universal brotherhood, its art pushing for human unity.
Music became a language of feeling. Chopin wrote haunting piano pieces that captured Polish nationalism and personal longing.
Wait, how can music show nationalism without words?
Through melodies based on folk tunes, rhythms from local dances, and emotional tones that evoke homeland pride. It's about feeling your identity.
Hector Berlioz even created a whole story in his Symphonie Fantastique. It's about an artist who takes opium and imagines being executed for killing his beloved. The music uses recurring themes to show obsession and madness.
Nationalism was also a major theme in Romantic music. Composers across Europe began using folk melodies and rhythms to celebrate their cultural roots. It wasn't just about technique, it was about identity. By drawing on traditional songs, local dances, and regional styles, they made music that felt emotionally tied to a national spirit.
You hear this in Chopin's polonaises and mazurkas, which reflected Polish folk traditions. In Hungary, Franz Liszt incorporated music inspired by Romani performers and rural Hungarian styles. And in Norway, Edvard Grieg's compositions echoed the landscapes and legends of the Scandinavian countryside.
So music became a kind of national storytelling?
Exactly. It was emotional and political at once. By turning regional traditions into high art, Romantic composers helped people feel connected to a shared heritage, especially in places where the idea of a nation was still emerging.
Who else stands out among Romantic composers?
Don't forget Franz Schubert. He wrote Lieder, German art songs that blend poetry and piano. One of his most famous is Erlkönig, where a father races to save his sick child from a supernatural being.
So it's like storytelling through music?
Yes, and with emotional nuance. Schubert uses different melodies and harmonies to represent each character.
And Liszt revolutionized piano performance. He turned concerts into theatrical events. His music was so complex and passionate that people fainted at performances.
Wow, that sounds exhausting.
It was for the composers, too. Many Romantic musicians struggled with loneliness or burnout. The idea of the tortured genius was born in this era.
That explains so much about modern musicians.
Definitely, the Romantic legacy runs deep.
Speaking of legacy, how did Romanticism shape the future?
It taught Europeans to value emotion, imagination, and the power of the individual. Romanticism laid the foundation for modern ideas about creativity, self-expression, and even rebellion.
It also fueled nationalist movements. The idea that each people had a unique soul, a Volksgeist, inspired efforts to unify nations like Germany and Italy.
And it's everywhere in pop culture. Movie soundtracks owe a lot to Romantic composers. Superhero films echo the Byronic hero. Fandom culture, all about personal passion and mythic storytelling.
So, being super emotional and loving epic stories, that's basically romantic?
In the best sense of the word.
And it's why teens today often connect so deeply with Romanticism. It speaks to the big feelings of growing up.
I love that. Okay, to wrap up, Romanticism was more than just a style. It was a movement that reshaped how people saw the world, felt about themselves, and fought for their dreams.
Beautifully said.
A very romantic conclusion, Casey.
Thanks, everyone. That wraps up episode 28. Next time, we'll be diving into the revolutions of 1848 and how those dreams of liberty and nationalism took to the streets. See you then!